They say success is the best revenge. But I wasn't looking for revenge that night. I just wanted to do my job. And maybe, quietly, finally step out from under the long, cold shadow of my sister's perfect reputation. The ballroom at the Chicago Grand Hotel buzzed with quiet power. Crystal chandeliers above, polished executives below, and deals worth millions being whispered over clinks of bourbon glasses. I adjusted my charcoal gray suit, ran a hand over my tie, and stepped into the space like a ghost among kings. No one knew who I was yet, and that's exactly how I wanted it, until I saw her. Vanessa Carter, my older sister, the golden child, the girl who never failed at anything, who had climbed the ladder at Falcon Ridge Financial like it was built just for her. She was holding court by the bar, dazzling in her designer navy dress, surrounded by her colleagues who laughed too hard at her jokes. She hadn't seen me yet. Good. I wasn't ready for her smug smile, the one that always twisted at the edges when she introduced me at family dinners as my little brother, still figuring things out. I hadn't told anyone, least of all her, that I was now CEO of Orion Systems, the very tech firm her company was scouting to acquire. She thought I was still bouncing between IT jobs, still the underachiever, still the disappointment. I took a breath. Tonight wouldn't be about proving anything to her. It would be about doing what I came here to do, represent my company, my team, and the vision I built from the ground up. But the universe had other plans, because 30 minutes later, I stood face to face with Vanessa. And before she could humiliate me in front of her entire executive team, her own boss, vice chairman of Falcon Ridge, stepped forward, pointed at me, and said the words that would freeze her fake smile in place. That's the CEO we're here to talk to. Growing up with Vanessa, as my sister, felt like being assigned the role of background character in someone else's highlight reel. Everything about her screamed excellence. Valedictorian at Lexington High, Ivy League scholarship to Columbia, internships with Fortune 100 firms before she could legally drink. At every holiday dinner, our parents beamed when she walked into the room, as if the prodigy had just descended from the clouds. And me? I was the kid who once got grounded for missing the school bus 3 days in a row because I was too deep in coding forms. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a disaster. But when you're constantly being measured against someone who seems incapable of failure, your own milestones start to feel like participation trophies. I remember once, in high school, I built a facial recognition app for our school science fair. It was clunky, sure, and it only worked about half the time, but I was proud of it. I spent weeks writing the back end from scratch. When I showed my parents, Dad said, "That's cool, Nate. Hey, Vanessa just got invited to shadow a partner at her law firm internship. Did you hear?" And just like that, my little triumph became an afterthought. Vanessa never rubbed it indirectly. No, she was smarter than that. She wielded her superiority like a velvet hammer. Soft voice, bright smile, and words that cut you before you even realized it. "It's great you're exploring so many jobs," she once said at Thanksgiving, her tone syrupy sweet. Some people take longer to find their calling. In college, I switched majors 3 times, started in business, then psych, finally landing in computer science. It took me 6 years and a truckload of student debt to earn a degree that no one even came to celebrate. Vanessa had a meeting she couldn't move, and my parents didn't want to make the trip alone. I told them I understood. I didn't. Not really. After graduation, my resume was a patchwork quilt. Help desk here, QA tester there, a 3-month freelance stint that paid in Bitcoin and regret. I wasn't lazy. I just didn't fit the mold. The mold that said success was linear, that you were supposed to climb ladders instead of building your own. Vanessa thrived in that structure. I suffocated in it. Then, 3 years ago, something changed. I met Jonathan Hale, a silver-haired tech investor in his late 60s. Jonathan came into the tiny computer repair shop I was working at because his hard drive had crashed. Everyone else wrote it off as a lost cause. I didn't. I spent 6 hours dissecting that drive like a surgeon with a scalpel, and somehow, miraculously, recovered all his files. He watched me like I was doing magic. "You don't think like everyone else," he said when I was packing up. "That's rare." We kept in touch. At first, just the occasional email. Then coffee meetings. Then calls. He became my mentor without ever formally saying so. And slowly, through his eyes, I started seeing myself differently. Not as the underachiever in Vanessa's shadow, but as someone who could actually build things. Big things. I started tinkering again, nights and weekends, long after my shift ended. I coded prototypes, an AI-powered logistics tool, a financial dashboard for small businesses, a lightweight CRM that integrated voice recognition. Nothing went viral. Nothing raised funding. But Jonathan saw potential. "You're not coding for code's sake," he said once. "You're solving real problems." Still, I never told Vanessa. What was the point? She just asked if I'd updated my LinkedIn or found a job with a 401k. We lived in different galaxies. Then came the call from Jonathan that would change everything. "Nate," he said, "there's a company in Chicago, Orion Systems. Promising tech, horrible market fit. Burn rates killing them. I've been brought in as a consultant, but they need someone who can think differently. I want you on this." Me? I almost dropped the phone. "I'm not a consultant. I've never even led a team." "You're a builder," he said. "And right now, that's what Orion needs." It took me a full day to say yes. I knew it would mean leaving the coast, quitting my current job, and risking whatever shaky momentum I'd built. But I also knew opportunities like this didn't come with guarantees. Just windows. And sometimes you had to jump through the damn window. 2 weeks later, I was in Chicago, standing in Orion's half-empty office, looking around at the remains of a startup on the brink of collapse. The walls were still plastered with motivational posters. The coffee machine was broken. The mood was worse. People didn't look at me like a savior. They looked at me like a question mark. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the question. I was ready to prove, mostly to myself, that I wasn't just someone's little brother. I wasn't a phase. I wasn't a mistake. I was someone who could lead. The first day at Orion Systems didn't feel like the start of something. It felt like I'd arrived at the scene of a quiet funeral no one wanted to attend. The elevator dinged open on the 17th floor, and I stepped into a silence so heavy it swallowed the buzz of fluorescent lights and the clatter of keyboards. The floor plan was open, but the energy was closed, locked down in resignation. Desks sat half-abandoned, whiteboards covered in half-erased dreams, and only a handful of employees made eye contact. They looked at me like I might be there to shut it all down. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wasn't. Jonathan met me by the reception area, his ever-pressed blazer doing little to hide the weariness in his eyes. "It's worse than I thought," he said quietly. "But that's why you're here." The executive team looked like a collection of war survivors. Middle-aged men in wrinkled button-downs, nursing coffees like 4 drips. They offered polite smiles, nods, handshakes without pressure. I was introduced simply as Nathan Carter, our strategic development consultant. They didn't ask about my background. No one wanted to dig deeper than surface level. Yet, that suited me fine. Over the next 2 weeks, I didn't pitch anything. I didn't talk vision. I just listened. I sat in every meeting, engineering, marketing, sales, operations, and absorbed. I asked questions, not with the arrogance of someone who thought they had better answers, but with the curiosity of someone who knew that the truth was buried beneath bureaucracy, ego, and bad habits. At night, I took my laptop home to the cramped apartment I was renting in the West Loop and pored over everything. Revenue models, product specs, customer feedback, burn rate forecasts. I ordered greasy Thai food and stayed up until 3 a.m. connecting dots no one had bothered to connect. And when I finally saw it, truly saw it, it hit me like a gut punch. Orion didn't have a product problem. They had a focus problem. The tech they'd built, an adaptive data integration system, was damn good. It could have revolutionized how mid-market companies managed information across platforms. But instead, they were trying to sell it to enterprise giants, Fortune 500s who already had bloated legacy systems and multi-year approval pipelines. The big fish were too slow. Orion was drowning, waiting for them to bite. The solution was painfully clear: pivot. Stop chasing whales. Start feeding the schools. I built a 42-page proposal. Realigned target demographics. Reworked the pricing model into a tiered SaaS structure. repackaged the product around real-life case studies. I even mocked up new branding materials because the old ones looked like a mid-2000s tax firm's website. Then I sent Jonathan a text. Need to talk. Urgent. We met the next morning at Lou Mitchell's, the kind of greasy spoon diner where big ideas feel more grounded between bites of bacon. I slid the printed binder across the table. He flipped through the first few pages, then stopped, looking up. "This is bold," he said. "It's survival," I replied. "And if it doesn't work, we're dead anyway." He didn't argue. That was never Jonathan's style. He just said, "Pitch it to the board." I didn't sleep the night before that meeting. I kept hearing Vanessa's voice in my head. Sarcastic, sharp, always correct. "Are you sure you're not out of your depth, little brother?" But I shoved that voice aside, ironed my best shirt, and walked into that boardroom with a steady hand. 8 board members. One shot. I started with the numbers. Not vanity metrics, actual revenue trends, conversion rates, burn projections. Then I walked them through the market opportunity, the misalignment, the solution. I didn't try to sound smarter than I was. I just told the truth. When I finished, the room was silent. One of the board members leaned back and crossed his arms. "This is ambitious," he said. "Not a compliment." Jonathan cut in. "It's also our best shot. You brought me in to find answers. This is one." The board agreed to a compromise. I'd lead a small team in a controlled rollout using the new strategy. If we saw tangible results in 60 days, they'd greenlight the full pivot. The clock started that afternoon. I pulled together 5 employees, 3 from engineering, 1 from sales, and Lisa Murphy from product. She was sharp-eyed, mid-30s, and had clearly been keeping the company afloat with duct tape and raw willpower. When I explained the plan, she didn't hesitate. "Finally," she said, "someone gets it." For the next 6 weeks, we lived on takeout and adrenaline. We rewrote the playbook, overhauled the user experience, rebuilt the messaging. I personally pitched over 40 mid-market clients. We closed 9 in the first 3 weeks. By week 6, our monthly revenue had doubled. By week 8, it had tripled. The board didn't just approve the pivot, they made it permanent. And they offered me the job. CEO. I stared at the offer letter like it might explode in my hands. CEO. Me. The guy whose sister still thought he was fixing Wi-Fi for a living. "You earned this," Jonathan said simply. "Now go prove it." I accepted, and I didn't tell Vanessa. Not yet. I didn't tell her because deep down, I wanted the silence to stretch a little longer. There's a part of me that needed to stand on my own for once. Not as someone reacting to her version of me, but as someone who had finally become something independent of her shadow. It wasn't about revenge, not then. It was about peace, or maybe a temporary illusion of it. For 3 months after stepping into the CEO seat at Orion, I lived in a strange state of dual existence. By day, I was leading a company through transformation, making decisions that affected payroll, growth, risk, and the livelihoods of real people. My inbox overflowed, my calendar was booked 3 weeks out, and I was suddenly the guy investors want to take to lunch. I should have felt powerful, triumphant even, but by night, when things got quiet, the old voice still whispered in my head. The one that said I didn't belong. Imposter syndrome is a funny thing. It doesn't disappear just because the world starts clapping for you. Sometimes it grows louder. I'd stare out the window of my Chicago apartment at midnight, looking down at the city lights and wonder when someone would show up and say, "We made a mistake. You're not supposed to be here." But I showed up every day anyway. I showed up tired. I showed up unsure. And over time, the doubt began to fade. Not because it vanished, but because I learned to work in spite of it. Then came the email. Subject: Industry Summit Invitation. From Falcon Ridge Corporate Relations. To Nathan Carter, CEO, Orion Systems. It was a formal invite to a private networking event in downtown Chicago, an informal prelude to potential acquisition talks. Falcon Ridge had identified Orion as a prime target for strategic investment or partnership, and the summit would host key executives from both sides. My stomach clenched when I read the sender's name. I didn't need to scroll down the guest list to know who would be attending. Vanessa, her firm, her world, and now mine too. I didn't tell her I'd be there. That wasn't pettiness. it was strategy. I wanted the room to see me before they saw Vanessa's brother. I wanted them to hear my ideas without her filtering my presence through 20 years of family dynamics and clever digs. I told no one except Emma, my best friend since college, and the only person who knew everything. My failures, my regrets, my battle with the echo of Vanessa's success. When I mentioned the summit, she nearly dropped her coffee. Wait, you're going to walk into a Falcon Ridge event without her knowing your CEO? I'm going to walk in and do my job, I said, but I couldn't keep the smirk off my face. Emma laughed. Oh, this is going to be so good. Call me the second it's over. I need every juicy detail. The night of the summit arrived faster than I wanted. I stood in front of my closet for an hour, second-guessing everything. A younger version of me would have worn something overly loud, desperate to impress. Tonight, I kept it simple, tailored charcoal gray suit, dark navy tie, polished but understated. I clipped the slim Orion pin onto my lapel and caught my own reflection in the mirror. Stronger jawline now, clearer eyes, a man who had survived storms, a man no longer apologizing for taking up space. The Grand Metro Hotel was buzzing with soft jazz, clinking glasses, and murmured deal speak when I arrived. I moved through the crowd like a current, not drawing attention yet, but noticing everything. Falcon Ridge's executives gathered near the central bar, easy to spot in their corporate uniform of tailored perfection. And there, in the middle, was Vanessa. She looked exactly as I remembered her, elegant, poised, utterly in command of her surroundings. Her laugh floated lightly above the conversations around her, the kind of laugh that said she'd already won whatever game was being played. She hadn't seen me yet. Good. I made my way to the far end of the room, casually engaging with tech VPs and startup founders, listening more than I spoke. It felt good. Earned to be treated as an equal in a space where I used to feel invisible. No one was calling me Vanessa's brother. No one was trying to place me. I was just Nathan Carter, the guy behind Orion's recent resurgence. Then I heard her voice. Excuse me, everyone. Can I borrow you just a second? I turned, and there she was, walking directly toward me, glass of white wine in hand, and that same smile she always used when she was about to say something she thought was charming, but was really a blade wrapped in velvet. Nathan, she said, loud enough for nearby ears. Wow, what a surprise. What brings you here? I gave her a polite smile. Industry event. I was invited. She blinked, her expression tightening just enough to notice. Of course. Of course. And what firm are you with these days? I could feel the weight of eyes on us now. Her colleagues watching, curious, waiting for the story she was about to spin. I'm with Orion, I said calmly. Oh, she said, faux enthusiasm creeping into her tone. Tech support, right? Or are you still bouncing around? Before I could respond, a tall man stepped forward. Vanessa's boss, Falcon Ridge's senior vice president, Lawrence Whitaker. He extended a hand and gave me a warm smile. You're Nathan Carter? I've heard great things. We've been looking forward to meeting with Orion's leadership. Then, without missing a beat, he turned to the small crowd forming around us and said clearly, Everyone, this is Nathan Carter, the CEO of Orion Systems. The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Vanessa froze, and in that single moment, every version of me she thought she knew shattered, replaced by the one standing calmly before her, no longer asking to be seen, but already seen by everyone else in the room. You don't forget a moment like that. Not because it's loud or dramatic, but because it's quiet, unnaturally quiet, like the air itself is holding its breath. Vanessa's expression didn't crumble immediately. That wasn't her style. No, she held her face in place the way a pageant queen holds a pose during the last photo, smiling even when the music stops. But I saw it. The microscopic twitch in her left eyebrow, the slight stiffening of her jawline, the fraction of a second delay in her next breath. She was unraveling beneath the surface, and I was watching it happen in real time. I nodded at Lawrence and shook his hand, keeping my tone casual. It's good to finally meet you. I appreciate the invitation. Around us, the Falcon Ridge team members were murmuring, faces shifting from polite interest to genuine surprise. Several people who had clearly written me off as background noise now looked at me with recalibrated attention, as if trying to piece together how they'd missed something so obvious. Vanessa tried to recover. CEO, she repeated, her voice lilting as if the word had a different meaning when applied to me. That's new. It's been about 6 months, I said evenly. We've been leading a full-scale turnaround. Early numbers are promising. Lawrence beamed. Promising? More like spectacular. Your new pricing strategy and client targeting have been the subject of internal discussion. Very impressive. Vanessa made a sound in her throat that wasn't quite a cough and not quite a laugh. Something brittle and unsure. Well, I guess I've been a little out of the loop, she said, and I could tell she hated the taste of that admission. I shrugged. You've been busy. Junior VP isn't exactly a light workload. The dig wasn't intentional. Or maybe it was. But the crowd picked up on it, and I saw the faint flicker of discomfort in her eyes as her standing, just for a moment, shrank in the presence of mine. For years, Vanessa had controlled the narrative. She was the voice in the room, the one who told the family stories, who defined who I was to our parents, our relatives, her co-workers, everyone. I was the little brother with a quirky job history, the guy who hasn't quite figured out, the one who builds apps or websites or something. She'd said these things for so long. I think even she believed them. But now I was standing across from her in a suit that fit better than her assumptions, flanked by executives who respected me, holding a title that redefined the entire equation. The worst part, I think, was that I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rub anything in her face. I just was confident, calm, credible, and somehow that disarmed her more than anything else could have. She tried again. Well, I'm sure this must be quite the leap for you. Leading a company is no small thing. True, I said. It's been a challenge, but rewarding. We're already up 40% in revenue since the pivot. There was a beat of silence. Then Lawrence clapped me on the shoulder. I'd love to hear more. We've been eager to explore synergies. I assume you're open to a partnership. I glanced sideways at Vanessa, whose smile had gone stiff, glassy. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her boss was now actively engaging with me, positioning me as the senior partner in the room. I'm open to a discussion, I said, still looking at her. As long as our company values stay intact. I'm not interested in being absorbed just to serve someone else's metrics. Lawrence chuckled. You sound like Jonathan Hale. I've learned from the best. We chatted briefly before he was called away by another VP. The circle dispersed, and I was left with Vanessa, just the two of us now, no buffer, no crowd to save her. She opened her mouth, probably to issue a joke or some sort of damage control. But I beat her to it. You know, I said, you once told me that I drifted from job to job because I lacked focus. Maybe you were right, but sometimes it takes a few wrong turns to know where the road really begins. She blinked, her expression unreadable. I didn't come here to humiliate you, I added, but I also didn't come here to hide. Vanessa looked at me, then, not through me, not past me, but at me, as if seeing me for the first time. Her lips parted, then closed again. No snark, no spin, just silence. I've got people waiting, I said, gesturing toward the far end of the ballroom where Lisa and 2 of our lead engineers were chatting with a group from IntelliSync. She nodded, slowly, almost with a hint of something like respect. I wasn't sure. As I turned and walked away, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a boat that had finally righted itself after years of drifting sideways in a current not its own. And maybe that was the real win. I didn't expect her to follow me. Not right away, at least. I figured she'd need time to collect herself. Maybe find a quiet corner to recalibrate her narrative, craft a version of the night where she hadn't just been blindsided in front of her own boss. But 15 minutes after I walked away, I felt the air shift behind me. That scent, Chanel No. 5, and something colder, sharper, told me before I even turned. Can we talk? Vanessa's voice wasn't sharp this time. No edge. No performance. Just flat. Measured. I nodded, gestured toward a quiet alcove just off the ballroom floor. A nook between 2 indoor palms where the ambient noise of clinking glasses and light jazz faded to a low hum. She folded her arms the way she always did when she felt cornered but didn't want to show it. Her eyes scanned the room behind me, like she was checking to make sure no one was watching. I had no idea, she said finally. I know. 6 months, Nathan. You've been CEO for 6 months and you didn't think to tell me? Or Mom and Dad? I leaned back slightly, hands in my pockets. Would you have believed me if I had? She didn't answer. Her lips twitched as if the honest answer wouldn't serve her in this moment. I wanted to prove it to myself first. I continued. I wanted to do the job, not just announce I had the title. It wasn't about you. Her brow arched. It feels like it was. I exhaled, not out of frustration, but out of recognition. This had always been our problem. Our entire relationship was built on a scale, one that could never balance. If I succeeded, it must mean she failed at something. If I kept quiet, it must be because I was plotting something. There was no room for neutral in the Carter family dynamic. I wasn't hiding from you, I said, voice low. But I wasn't chasing your validation either. I'm just not interested in that game anymore. Vanessa stared at me for a long moment. The hard mask she wore at work was starting to crack at the corners. For once, she looked more human than myth. You embarrassed me, she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just the truth. And you mocked me, I said quietly. For years. Sometimes to my face, sometimes behind my back. You made sure everyone knew you were the success story, and I was the experiment that never worked. Her jaw tensed. And yet, I added, here we are. She looked away for a second, biting the inside of her cheek. Then, softer, I didn't expect you to grow into this. That makes 2 of us. We stood there, not quite facing each other. A full conversation playing out in silence between people who had spent years learning to speak at each other instead of with each other. I talked to Lawrence earlier, she said. He's impressed. He thinks we could really benefit from a partnership. He's not wrong, I replied, but it depends on the terms. I won't sell Orion's vision short just for a bigger logo on our letterhead. I know, she said. Then, after a pause, he's asked me to lead the integration discussions if we move forward. My eyebrows lifted slightly. You're okay working with me? She offered the faintest smile. I didn't say I was comfortable with it, but I'm willing to try. That was the closest thing to a truce Vanessa Carter had ever offered me. I'm open to it, I said, if it's what's best for the company. She nodded. Business first. As we made our way back toward the main floor, I felt something strange settle over me. It wasn't warmth. Not yet. But it also wasn't resentment. Somewhere in between, something fragile, like the first crack of sunlight through a storm cloud. Later that night, after the event, I sank into my apartment couch, still in my suit, tie loosened, drink untouched on the coffee table. My phone buzzed. A message from Emma. Well, tell me everything. I stared at the screen for a second before typing back. She knows. And I thought about it, then wrote. For the first time in my life, she saw me. It had been years since I stood on the front porch of my parents' house without a pit forming in my stomach. The siding was freshly painted, the flower beds neatly trimmed, and the porch light buzzed faintly with the effort of staying alive. A suburban postcard, comforting and unchanged, even as everything inside me had shifted. Vanessa's car was already in the driveway. Jet black Mercedes, freshly detailed, not a fingerprint on it, just like her. I sat in my car for a moment longer, gripping the steering wheel with the kind of tension usually reserved for emergency landings. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not professionally, not even personally, but there was something uniquely disarming about stepping back into the role of little brother under a roof that had never really seen me as anything else. Inside, the house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic bread, familiar and warm, as if it could somehow cook away 2 decades of quiet disappointment. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel and offering the kind of smile she'd given Vanessa on graduation day. Nathan, she said, pulling me into a hug, it's so good to see you. You look different. Sharp. Thanks, I replied, returning the hug. It's been a busy few months. My father stood in the hallway, arms crossed in his usual stoic posture. So, he said after a beat, I hear congratulations are in order. I nodded. I've been meaning to tell you. I just wanted to settle into the role first. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer her usual commentary, didn't take the lead. For the first time in maybe forever, she let me speak. We sat at the table like diplomats preparing for a summit. For people who had known each other forever and somehow still didn't really know each other at all. My mother fussed over the roles. My father poured wine none of us really needed, and the silence hung like fog over the roast. Finally, over dessert, the ice cracked. I have to say, my dad began, I didn't expect this. CEO, a whole company. I know, I said calmly, setting down my fork. Neither did a lot of people, but it's happening. You didn't tell us, my mom said, hurt softening the corners of her voice. 6 months, Nathan. That's not a small promotion. It wasn't about hiding it from you, I said, choosing my words carefully. It was about doing it. I needed to know I could actually lead, not just wear the title. Vanessa shifted slightly, then surprised us all by speaking. I understand why he didn't tell us, she said. Our family has always had strong roles. I've been the achiever. Nathan's been, well, the one we weren't sure about. That's not fair, my mother protested, but even she didn't sound convinced. No, she's right, I said. When I dropped out of college, Dad, you told me I should try to be more like Vanessa. When I changed jobs, Mom, you asked if I'd ever find my place like she did. Maybe you didn't mean anything by it, but it landed. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was contemplative. My father looked at his plate, my mother at her folded napkin. We never meant to compare, Dad said eventually. But you did, I replied. And that's okay. I just want to be honest about what it felt like. Vanessa cleared her throat. I owe you an apology, too. I've said things in public that weren't kind, that weren't fair, that made you smaller so I could stay bigger. That's on me. The admission stunned me more than any compliment would have. Thanks, I said, meaning it. We talked for another hour. About Orion, about Falcon Ridge, about the possibility of working together. The conversation was still formal, careful, but something had changed. The lines had been redrawn. For the first time, we were on even ground. When it was time to leave, my mother hugged me again, longer this time. My father shook my hand with a kind of pressure I hadn't felt in years. Vanessa followed me to the driveway. You meant it, right? She asked. About considering the partnership. I did, I said, but it has to make sense for both sides. She nodded. It can. Then, after a pause, I'm proud of you. You've built something real. Coming from her, that felt bigger than the job title. As I got in the car, she reached for the door, held it for a second longer, and said, I'm still your sister, you know? Maybe now I can start being the kind of one you actually needed. I think we're both figuring out what kind of siblings we can be, I said. Starting now. She let go of the door, stepped back, and for the first time since childhood, smiled at me without agenda. I drove away lighter than I had in years. The Monday after dinner, my inbox exploded. Messages from Falcon Ridge, investment interest from 2 mid-sized banks, and a cryptic one-liner from my assistant. Lawrence Fletcher wants a call. Urgent. No subject line. No attachments. Just that. I called it before finishing my coffee. Nathan, he said, skipping all pleasantries, I want to change the terms. I froze for half a second. We haven't agreed on terms. Exactly, he replied. Because what I wanted last week isn't what I want now. He explained that, after reviewing Orion's proprietary tech more closely, Falcon Ridge's leadership now believed an outright acquisition would kill what made us valuable. They were considering an alliance instead, something closer to a deep integration partnership. No buyout, no surrendering control, just a structured fusion of services and platforms. And then he said it. I want your sister to lead our side. Silence. Not because I was shocked. Honestly, I had expected it, but because I was still learning what it meant to separate personal history from professional instinct. Vanessa was sharp. She knew the Falcon Ridge infrastructure inside and out. She was capable, but putting her in the middle of everything, that was a different kind of test. She's the right choice, I said slowly, but it has to work both ways. That's why I'm calling, Lawrence replied. Because she said the same thing about you. We scheduled the first integration meeting for Thursday morning. Our office's neutral ground. Lisa wasn't thrilled. She'd been by my side since the first day I walked into Orion's crumbling lobby, and the thought of bringing in someone from the same firm that had once dismissed us rubbed her the wrong way. "Are we doing this because it's smart?" she asked bluntly. "Or because it's poetic?" "Both," I said, "but mostly smart." I expected Vanessa to show up with that CEO swagger she'd perfected in boardrooms and holiday dinners alike. But when she walked into our glass conference room that morning, she looked focused, not stiff, not showy. Professional, yes, but more grounded than I'd seen her in years. She shook hands with Lisa, nodded at my engineers, and didn't so much as flinch when someone called me boss. We got to work. The discussions were tense at first. Lots of tech speak, platform incompatibilities, and licensing protocols that could have derailed us in 3 different directions. But Vanessa kept her tone measured, her language precise. She asked smart questions, pushed back in the right places, and, most surprisingly, deferred to me when it made sense. By lunch, we were halfway through a roadmap neither side had thought possible 2 weeks ago. While the rest of the team went out for sandwiches, Vanessa and I lingered behind, poring over data security protocols. She leaned back in her chair at one point and said, almost absently, "You were right about mid-market targeting. That pivot saved you." I looked up, uncertain whether it was a compliment or a trap. She clarified, "I would have missed it if I'd been running Orion. I would have gone big. Corporate." I shrugged. That was the plan originally. It almost buried us. She nodded, then smiled, a real one, faint and human. "Guess you've learned a few things. And unlearned a few others," I said. "Like trying to be you." She paused. "You never had to be me. You just made it feel like I did." That one landed. But she didn't flinch. "Fair," she said quietly. We didn't dwell on it. Didn't drag the moment out or try to tidy it into something it wasn't. We simply turned the page. 2 people rewriting the ending of a book they never agreed on in the first place. By the end of the day, we had a framework. Falcon Ridge would integrate Orion's system into 3 of their client divisions. Data would remain sovereign on our side. Branding would remain ours. Vanessa would lead her team. I'd lead mine. And we'd meet twice a week together. When she left, she said, "We're going to pull this off, you know." "I believe it," I replied. "I'll try not to make you regret this," she added. "Don't," I said. "Just don't make yourself regret it." She gave me a long look. Not defensive. Not cold. Just seeing me. Finally, as the door closed behind her, Lisa came over, arms crossed. "Well," she said, "I'll admit it. She's good." "Yeah," I said, staring at the space Vanessa had just walked out of. "She is. But good is never enough when family is involved." We had proven we could work together. What came next would prove if we could trust each other. It started with a spreadsheet. Technically, it started with an email attached to a spreadsheet. Subject line, recommended structural changes TO Orion Infra Integration. Sent at 11:42 p.m. by Vanessa. No greeting, no context, just a neatly color-coded document proposing 6 major revisions to our back-end systems. I read it 3 times. First in curiosity, then in disbelief, then in rising heat. 3 of her recommendations made sense. Clean, surgical, well-aligned with Falcon Ridge's security protocols. But the other 3? They weren't just ambitious. They were invasive. One would shift control of customer data sync to Falcon Ridge's servers. Another would embed their middleware directly into our core processing flow. It was clean, yes, but it was also dangerous. The next morning, I walked into the office earlier than usual. Lisa was already at her desk, eyebrows raised. She'd seen the email too. "She trying to run your company now?" she asked, without looking up from her screen. "I don't think that was the intention," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "She's not dumb, Nathan. She knows what she's doing." That much was true. Vanessa had always known exactly what she was doing. When she walked into the conference room later that morning, coffee in one hand and Falcon Ridge branded tablet in the other, I skipped the small talk. "We need to talk about your proposal." She sat down, posture impeccable. "Of course. You're suggesting changes that compromise our infrastructure." "I'm suggesting optimizations that reflect the demands of scale," she replied calmly. "If we're going to integrate across our entire portfolio, this is the cleanest path forward." I leaned forward slightly, folding my hands. Clean is for you, but not for us. Vanessa blinked. Nathan, I thought we were past the assumption that I'm playing games here. This is about operational efficiency. No, this is about control, I said. And you know it. The room cooled by 10 degrees. The other team members found excuses to stare at laptops and notepads. Vanessa's jaw tensed. You asked me to lead integration, she said. That means trusting me to make decisions. I did, I said, voice level. But leading integration doesn't mean rewriting our DNA. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. Let me be clear, I said. I didn't build Orion just to sell it off piece by piece. We didn't claw our way back from the brink to become someone's white label backend. And I won't let our culture or our autonomy get sliced up for the sake of quarterly optics. A long pause followed. Vanessa looked down at her notes, then slowly closed the tablet. You think I'm trying to take over, she said, not as a question. I think, I replied, you've been trained to believe taking over is the only way to lead. That one cut, I saw it hit her, not like a punch, but like a bruise forming slow and deep. She looked at me, not with anger, but with something more dangerous, wounded pride. I don't want to fight you, she said. Then stop treating this like a competition, I said. We're not kids playing tug-of-war in the backyard anymore. You don't need to win for me to have value. She sat back, quiet, the tension in her shoulders finally beginning to dissolve. After a long silence, she nodded. You're right, she said. Some habits die hard. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed to see what she did next. Later that day, a revised spreadsheet arrived in my inbox. 3 suggestions removed, 2 rephrased, 1 added, but this time with a note. Let me know if this still feels like overstepping. Trying to recalibrate. I stared at it for a long time. Not perfect, not solved, but different. And maybe that was enough for now. It wasn't a boardroom. It was a ballroom. 3 weeks after integration began, Falcon Ridge hosted its annual investor summit, an invitation-only affair at the Wexler Hotel in Manhattan, where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen rain and everyone smelled like money and ambition. Orion had a front-row seat this year. Literally, our new alliance was the showpiece of the afternoon presentation, and Vanessa and I were scheduled to co-present. It was supposed to be a victory lap, but the second I stepped onto the mezzanine and heard the tightly wound laughter of old men in expensive suits, I felt the same old itch along my collar. I hated these events, not because of the pressure I could handle, but because of the quiet judgments, the glances, the whispered questions. Who is that again? Why is he here? Vanessa arrived 20 minutes later, dressed in deep navy, sharp and silent. We hadn't talked since I pushed back on her infrastructure proposal. Things were professional between us, cooperative, even but still guarded, still walking that narrow bridge we'd only just begun to rebuild. She nodded toward the bar. You see the guy with the red tie? She said under her breath. Yeah, that's Harlan Kress, senior partner at Lockford Holdings. He's the one behind the original acquisition push. Not thrilled we pivoted to alliance. I'm not here to make Harlan thrilled, I said. She gave me a glance. No, but he's here to stir up doubt. I didn't get it, at least not until halfway through the presentation. We stood side by side on stage, detailing the efficiency gains, the client success stories, the projected Q4 trajectory. The room nodded along. Phones buzzed quietly as people forwarded bullet points. It was going fine, until the Q&A. Harlan stood, all posture and pedigree, and asked his question with surgical precision. Ms. Carter, he said smoothly, while we respect the impressive numbers from Orion's turnaround, some of us are curious. How much of that momentum is sustainable without Falcon Ridge oversight? Specifically, how much of the current leadership at Orion is repeatable? The subtext hit like a sucker punch. He wasn't asking about strategy. He was questioning me, my qualifications, my right to be in the room. The silence that followed was heavy. Vanessa hesitated for only a second, but I saw it. That tiny pause. The same kind of pause she used to make at family dinners when someone joked about my latest job. The kind of pause that once meant she wouldn't correct them. But this time, she cleared her throat. And her voice, when it came, was steel-wrapped velvet. I think the better question, she said, is how quickly Falcon Ridge can adapt to Orion's pace. Because under Nathan's leadership, they didn't just recover. They outperformed every post-pivot benchmark we set internally. The culture, the resilience, the velocity, those aren't side effects. They're design, and he built that. She didn't look at me while she said it. She looked straight at Harlan, and I realized with a strange tangle of emotion in my chest that she had just done something she had never done before. Not in a boardroom, not in a backyard, not even in the eyes of our parents. She stood with me. Harlan raised an eyebrow, offered a clipped smile, and sat down. The questions continued. We finished the session. The applause was real, but I didn't hear any of it, because all I could think about was what it meant for her to defend me, not out of obligation, not to protect a partnership, but because I had earned it. Backstage, we packed up our notes in silence. Then Vanessa said, softly, I should have done that years ago. I turned to her. But you didn't. She met my eyes. And I'm trying to fix that. I nodded. I know. There were no hugs. No big speeches. Just a quiet recalibration. Later that night, I found a message from Emma waiting on my phone. I saw the live stream. She backed you. You okay? I typed back. Yeah, better than okay. I think we might actually be building something real. You and her. Me and her. Me and this company. Me and the version of myself that stopped apologizing for taking up space. And for the first time, that last one didn't feel like a line. It felt like the truth. 6 months later, the partnership between Orion Systems and Falcon Ridge wasn't just functional. It was thriving. Our shared platform had become the cornerstone of Falcon Ridge's mid-market offerings. Client adoption soared. Analysts started using words like disruptive, scalable, and category-defining. And while I knew better than to believe the hype, part of me couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. Vanessa and I had settled into a strange but solid rhythm. Our twice-weekly integration meetings were still packed with tension. We were both meticulous, stubborn, allergic to mediocrity, but the tension was productive now. It didn't sting. It drove us forward. Trust didn't come all at once. It never does. It wasn't a single handshake or apology or moment on stage. It was built across hundreds of small things. The late-night Slack messages, the way she asked my opinion in front of her team, the way I looped her in without needing to. One Thursday morning, we sat across from each other in my office at Orion HQ, a wall of whiteboards behind us covered in arrows, sketches, and post-its, the visual chaos of people who were building something real. Vanessa set down her coffee. There's talk upstairs, she said. I looked up. Upstairs. Falcon Ridge board. Some want to revisit the acquisition angle. Turn the partnership into a full buyout. I felt my jaw tighten. And you? She shrugged. I told him no. That Orion works because it's not Falcon Ridge. Because it has you. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just let that sit between us. It wasn't flattery. It was respect. Thank you, I said. She smiled, soft, honest. I don't protect people who can't stand on their own. You've more than earned that ground. That night, I drove out to my parents' house, unannounced this time. Mom was in the garden. Dad was reading the paper. When I told him about the keynote I'd just been invited to give at Tech Future 2026, Dad set his paper down and said, Your sister said you'd be getting that call. I blinked. She did. She's proud of you, Nathan, he said. She doesn't say it like you do, but it's there. I nodded, feeling something settle in my chest that I didn't know I'd been carrying. A week later, Vanessa and I presented our joint case study at a global conference. Thousands of people, cameras, lights. And when we stepped off stage, a young developer, maybe 24, stopped me. Hey, he said, nervous and hopeful. I saw your story online. About your sister, your company, everything. I got a brother who's kind of like you were. I think he needs to see this, just to know it's possible. I shook his hand, looked him in the eye. It is. He walked away. Vanessa caught my glance and gave a small nod, as if she'd heard the whole exchange. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't a story about corporate revenge, or competition, or proving someone wrong. It was about outgrowing who people thought you were supposed to be. It was about healing, not loudly, not perfectly, but day by day, action by action, until the past stopped steering the wheel. Vanessa and I would never be simple, but we were something better now, real. And as I looked out at the audience, and the applause still echoing from our talk, I thought of every time she'd introduced me as the kid who hadn't figured it out. I thought of every job I'd quit, every time I'd sat in my car rehearsing reasons why I didn't belong. And I smiled, because the truth was, I belonged here. Not because someone said so, but because I built my way here. Have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? A sibling, a parent, maybe even a former boss? Share your story in the comments, because someone else might need to hear it. And if Nathan's journey reminded you that your path doesn't have to follow anyone else's blueprint, hit that like button to let us know you're rewriting your own story. Subscribe for more real stories of transformation, resilience, and unexpected success. Because sometimes the people who doubt you are the ones who inspire you the most.